something shifted behind palace walls. And this time, it wasn't a rumor whispered through tabloids or a staged headline dropped at midnight. It was a quiet, calculated move that has reportedly left Prince Harry completely exposed. Because the moment King Charles was said to have reviewed a so-called confidential briefing on the entire family standoff, the story stopped being emotional and started looking strategic.
So he tried this emotional blackmail on his dad. He was going to bring Meghan and the kids, Archie and Lilibet, and of course the king would get to see his beloved grandchildren for the first time in 4 years.
They will not receive full police protection, which may have included, by the way, a police motorcade for when they are travelling, and that is Harry's dream.
My understanding is that the king is absolutely resolute that it's nothing to do with him. He's not going to interfere. He's never interfered. He's left it up to Ravik.
Harry wants the whole 9 yards. That when he's in the United Kingdom and he gets into a car, there are motorbikes in front of him, SUVs, tanks, helicopters.
A grandfather waiting, not for a ceremony, not for cameras, but for a message that never arrived, a confirmation that kept slipping through his fingers like something deliberately withheld. And that image, alone a king staring at a silent phone, has now become the emotional center of a situation that insiders claim is far more complex than anyone originally thought. Because what was once framed as distance is now being reframed as pressure. And that's where everything begins to feel different. The timeline doesn't just raise eyebrows anymore, it raises questions. Serious ones. Because just as preparations were reportedly being finalized, just as expectations were quietly building, something intervened, and according to emerging whispers, that something may have been outlined in a document that didn't just summarize events, but allegedly map them, step by step, move by move, a pattern, not an accident.
Yes, I think this was the plan all along. It was to sort of build King Charles up and Britain to the idea that our king is finally going to get to see his grandchildren again, and then to whip that away from the king and the nation by saying, well, you still won't give me that gun guard, police armed protection that I need, that I demand, so you won't give it to me, so nah, I'm not going to bring Meghan and the kids back now. I think that Harry actually thought that if he could set up this meeting between his kids, Archie and Lilibet, and the king, that the security he demanded, or he's been demanding now for a couple of years, would suddenly fall into place. He'd get that automatic armed police protection he's always demanded, and everything would be hunky-dory. But of course, they've turned round, the authorities here, and said, look, that doesn't make any difference. You're not getting an armed guard. Your British taxpayers are not going to pay for police protection for you, mate. You ran away. You're not a front-line royal. You're not getting it.
And suddenly, the focus isn't just on what Harry is asking for, it's on how he's asking. Because this isn't the first time the security issue has surfaced. And yet this time, it arrived with something extra attached to it. A privately commissioned report, a carefully constructed narrative, and a sequence of public and private signals that some commentators are now calling too precise to ignore, too timed, too controlled. But here's where it turns, because if King Charles truly did review a briefing, not from media noise, but from within institutional channels, then this stops being a family disagreement and starts becoming something far colder. Because briefings aren't built on emotion. They're built on patterns, consequences, and intent. And if intent is being discussed behind closed doors, then the stakes have quietly escalated beyond reconciliation.
Hold up, stop the presses. I thought this was all settled, that they weren't going to get their security, and there was this back and forth, and recapping this story and looking at what was said in the press, it looked like he wasn't going to get the security. This is not really new news, okay? We just weren't told that they were bringing Harry and Meghan, or, that Harry was bringing Meghan and the kids. We weren't told that King Charles had offered them a royal residence. We weren't told that, Harry had finally found a way to make this trip happen, considering we just started hearing stories about, Meghan's coming and the kids are coming, okay? Now, let me just tell you how I believe that whole story around the kids and Meghan even coming to the UK happened. Because I don't think that was actually, out there. we just heard the news. And still people are saying, oh, they're not going to come, they're not going to come. As I've always said in the beginning, how this worked, because it never made sense that Harry was saying that I can't bring my family to the UK because it's not safe. We know that is a bunch of malarkey. We know that is a bunch of gobbledygook. That don't make no sense.
So now Harry is apparently, this is what I wanted to get your take on, this is extraordinary. He's shelled out yet more money on a 40-page risk assessment by a security organisation that he's paid for, and he's now presented this to the government, and it says that the Duke of Sussex, when he comes to host the Invictus Games, could be a serious terrorist target, and that could create a mass casualty event.
What makes this even more explosive is the suggestion that the briefing didn't just outline Harry's request, it allegedly examined the sequence itself. The announcement, the anticipation, the withdrawal, the pressure point, a rhythm that when viewed all at once doesn't feel random anymore, it feels designed. And that's the word quietly echoing in the background right now, designed. Because think about it, if a visit is confirmed, then questioned, then publicly destabilized within hours, what does that create? Not just confusion, but leverage. Not just disappointment, but visibility. And when visibility becomes the currency, every move starts to look less like a reaction and more like positioning.
Tried this emotional blackmail on his dad. His father has told him, I do not decide on these matters. I can't help you there. So now Harry is apparently, this is what I wanted to get your take on, this is extraordinary. He's shelled out yet more money on a 40-page risk assessment by a security organisation that he's paid for, and he's now presented this to the government, and it says that the Duke of Sussex, when he comes to host the Invictus Games, could be a serious terrorist target, and that could create a mass casualty event. This is a private security firm saying that. In other words, if Harry comes, there'll be the possibility of a mass casualty event if he's the subject of a terrorist attack. Well, and he's given this to the government to say, well, there you go, you've got to give me armed guards. Well, I would say if that's true, don't come. Don't put other people at risk, just don't come. This is getting ridiculous, Kinsey.
Yeah, this is the same report, I believe, that he was putting together when he was threatening the NYPD, his team sending the NYPD emails saying, we're going to get Gavin Newsom involved, the governor of California. We need your assistance here. We need you to back us up. That there was a high-speed car chase throughout the streets of New York after Meghan Markle accepted another trophy, which the mayor at the time, Eric Adams, came out and said, well, that's ludicrous. And NYPD was like, this is not even remotely close to the truth. And so Harry's team was emailing the NYPD, trying to strong arm them, saying, don't make us get Governor Gavin Newsom involved of the state of California. And the NYPD was like, nice try. This isn't working.
And this is where the internal divide reportedly sharpens. Because within the structure that governs these decisions, the answer has remained consistent for years. No change, no exception, no escalation. Yet outside that structure, the narrative keeps evolving, keeps intensifying, keeps returning with new framing, new urgency, new stakes. And when those two worlds collide, policy versus pressure, something has to give. Except this time, nothing did. Which raises the most uncomfortable question of all. If the outcome was always going to be the same, then what was the real objective? Because insiders are now suggesting that the real impact wasn't meant to be felt inside a courtroom or a committee, but inside a relationship, a very specific one, a father who cannot intervene, a son who knows it, and a situation where the expectation itself becomes the point of tension.
It is a soap opera. It has got everything that you would expect from a chaotic appearance of Harry and Meghan and their desperation to get maximum attention, maximum coverage. But this time they've got no one else they can blame for the clown circus, which is now surrounding this entire trip, because it was their operational notes that they decided to give to the media on Friday, being security conscious and all, which has left a lot of people with a lot of egg on their faces. In fact, when I was at the ball Saturday night, I met a lovely lady in the toilets in a beautiful red dress, and she said to me, "You're going to have to eat your shoe." I was like, "What? What are you talking about? Why?" And then it's down to me saying, "I'm gonna eat my shoe if they bring the kids over." Do you remember me saying that? Well, she did.
He has lost his ever-loving mind. He cannot deal with the no, and he's losing it. He's completely lost it, okay? So Harry is saying that they went back on their word in the 11th hour. They're saying, or Harry is saying, that I just may not even bring my children now to the UK or my wife because you guys changed your mind. You were supposed to give me security. Well, that's not what happened. What happened was Harry was making it sound as if he was going to get the security before it was actually even ruled on, and he wanted to force their hand. He wanted to say, "I'm going to put it out there. Well, I'm sure to get it, and, you know, it's nailed on." And he was making all these things in the press to intimidate, to bully, to try to connive his way into some security without an official ruling on it.
And now, layered on top of all of this, is the idea that King Charles may have seen the full picture at once, not fragments, not headlines, but a structured version of events that connects the emotional with the tactical. And if that's true, then the silence from the palace suddenly feels heavier, more deliberate, because silence in this context isn't absence, it's awareness. Meanwhile, outside those walls, the contrast keeps building. One side operating quietly, consistently, predictably, the other side moving through headlines, statements, reversals, and reactions that seem to reset the narrative every few days. And audiences are starting to notice that difference not in what's being said, but in what keeps repeating. Because patterns don't lie, they accumulate. And right now, the pattern being discussed isn't just about security or travel or logistics, it's about control. Who has it, who doesn't, and who is trying to reshape it from the outside. So when you hear that a confidential briefing may have crossed the king's desk, don't just think about what was in it, think about what it represents. A moment where everything is no longer fragmented. A moment where intention, timing, and consequence are all placed side by side. The moment a situation stops being emotional and starts being analyzed like a case file, everything changes. And that's exactly where this story appears to be heading now. Because once a confidential briefing enters the picture, it doesn't just sit there as paperwork, it reframes the entire narrative, stripping away the surface explanations and forcing every action to be viewed through a colder, sharper lens, and insiders are quietly suggesting that this is precisely what may have happened behind palace doors. Because imagine the shift: a father no longer reacting in fragments, no longer absorbing headlines one by one, but instead seeing a compiled version of events laid out in sequence, where anticipation is followed by withdrawal, where requests are paired with timing, where outcomes are measured against reactions, and suddenly what once felt like isolated incidents begins to look like a connected chain, and once that chain is visible, the interpretation changes whether anyone admits it publicly or not. And this is where the pressure doesn't just stay on Harry externally, it turns inward, because if the narrative he has been building begins to collide with an internal interpretation that frames it differently, then every future move becomes heavier, more scrutinized, more difficult to explain away as coincidence, and that's exactly the tension people are starting to pick up on now. This quiet but growing sense that the story is no longer being consumed the same way on both sides. Because on one side, the messaging continues safety, protection, concern, unresolved issues that demand attention, but on the other side, if these reports are even partially accurate, the framing may have shifted towards something far less sympathetic, something that looks at repetition instead of reasoning, something that asks not why is this happening, but why does it keep happening this way? And that distinction, subtle as it seems, changes everything about how the situation is handled moving forward. And then there's the question nobody is asking out loud, but everyone is circling around: what happens when trust quietly erodes, not because of one event, but because of a pattern that keeps reinforcing itself? Because trust isn't broken in a single moment like this, it's worn down gradually, through sequences that start to feel familiar, through outcomes that start to feel predictable. And if that's the stage this has reached, then no single gesture, no sudden reversal, no last-minute appearance can fully reset it, which is why the silence feels so different now, because it doesn't carry confusion anymore, it carries distance. And distance in a situation like this isn't accidental, it's maintained. It's deliberate. It's the space created when engagement no longer serves a purpose. And that alone tells its own story without needing a statement, without needing a denial, without needing anything at all. At the same time, the public layer of this story keeps moving, keeps evolving, keeps presenting new angles and new interpretations, but beneath that movement, there's a stillness forming, a kind of fixed position where the outcome may already be understood internally, even if it hasn't been acknowledged externally. And that's the part that makes this feel less like an ongoing negotiation and more like something that has quietly reached its conclusion behind the scenes. Because if the briefing did what briefings are designed to do, simplify complexity into clarity, then the emotional weight of the situation doesn't disappear, but it stops being the deciding factor. And once emotion is removed from the center, what's left is structure, precedent, and consequence. And those things don't bend easily, no matter how personal the stakes may be. So now the question isn't just whether Harry makes the trip or whether the family reunites or whether the next headline softens the tone. The real question is whether anything can interrupt the pattern that has already been recognized. Because once a pattern is acknowledged at that level, it becomes the reference point for everything that follows. Every request, every statement, every move, all measured against what has already been seen. And that's where this story leaves off for now. Not with a resolution, not with a confrontation, but with a quiet, unresolved tension that feels heavier precisely because nothing is being said about it. Because sometimes the most decisive moments aren't the loudest ones, they're the ones that happen out of view, documented, processed, and understood long before the public ever catches up. And by the time the next development appears on the surface, the outcome beneath it may already be set in place.